justification for being what it was.
Welcome to Washington Unplugged. I'm John Dickerson. It's tax day in America. The IRS is set to process over 224 million tax returns today. Not far from their Washington headquarters in Freedom Plaza, several anti-tax groups are protesting that fact. Kaylee Hartung was there. Kaylee, tell us what you see.
After 19 days and 49 stops, the Tea Party Express protest tour is stopping here in Washington today. You've got Saxby Chambliss on the stage here now. You're hearing fiery rhetoric. You're seeing some angry signs. People have traveled from all over to be here to get Washington's attention. I talked to some folks from Georgia, Virginia, Florida, even Seattle, Washington. I also talked with Congressman Louis Gohmert from Texas. He said people are tired of being lied to, and the goal of today is really to get Washington's attention, obviously. They're hoping Congress listens, and it sounds like we won't know if they do until November, and until then, these folks are not quieting down.
Earlier today, I interviewed Ken Hoagland, a speaker at today's rallies and author of The Fair Tax Solution. He's also chairman of the online tax revolt, and I asked him what that was.
Well, the online tax revolt is a chance for Americans in every hometown across the country to add their voice to say, hey, we know that the income tax system is terribly broken, terribly unfair, but it's a digital expression of that. You pick a digital avatar, graphic representation of yourself. You march across the country, in this case to Washington, D.C. today, April 15th. More than 270,000 people so far over the last 4 weeks. And there you join live tax protests and add your voice to this growing American chorus that we don't want this kind of a tax system. We know it bedevils every taxpayer. It's too complicated, too expensive just to obey the law, and terribly unfair. And we want something better. It is flat taxers, fair taxers, Reagan tax cutters, all of the tax reform ideas, and everyone who just knows something has gone terribly wrong with our government, and the income tax system is what fuels it.
Tell me about that split, though. You can get a lot of people to dislike the tax code, but there has always been difficulty then on getting people to agree on the different kinds of remedies. Right. And that always seems to be the hang-up. We come around every year and we all complain about the tax code, those of us particularly who have to fill it out ourselves. Right. And then we have this question of, well, but do we have a VAT? Do we have a flat tax? And so how does that problem get solved?
You are so right. That has always been the problem up until now. The online tax revolt represents a kind of a wonderful development. It is a bringing together of all of the different tax reform ideas. We haven't quite sorted out which is the best one yet. I passionately believe that it's the fair tax, but I respect Steve Forbes and Dick Armey and all those who embrace the flat tax. I really look back at the history and see what Ronald Reagan did to simplify the tax code. We'll get down to what the best solution is later. The wonderful thing that's happening right now is we're putting aside those differences because we're united by the more important idea that this tax code is broken and must be fixed. And given the self-interest in Washington, it will not be fixed unless we all come together and put that kind of citizen pressure on our legislators.
I want to ask you about self-interest in a moment, but let me, there have been some polls that show that a majority of Americans, 62% I believe in one recent poll I looked at, thought the taxes they paid were fair. In a CBS poll, a recent poll we did of Tea Party supporters, a majority thought the taxes they paid were fair. What do you think accounts for that?
Well, I'm not sure. Could it be that 48% of the population aren't paying any income tax at all? Maybe that affects it. But there are so many...
Federal income tax.
Federal income tax. There are so many obvious just examples of how broken it is. You just mentioned the headache of filling out your tax forms. That cost us all $310 billion last year before we ever paid a penny of tax. Married people are taxed at a higher rate than singles living together. Income is commonly double and triple taxed. We're giving foreign producers an advantage over the Made in America label because of built-in taxes in the cost of American products. The Congress is selling off 2 to 3 tax breaks a day. They have been for 25 years, 18,000 changes in the last 20 years. It has bloated the tax code to indecipherability, 67,500 pages of regulations. Now, any law, I'll just put it in the most simple way, any law that cost $310 billion to obey is just flawed on its face.
When getting back to your notion about self-interest, the reason in a lot of cases that the tax code is so huge is that everybody wants their little special piece of the pie. And one of the reasons the tax conversation breaks down a lot of times is that if you talk, say, about a flat tax and you say to people, well, your mortgage interest deduction will disappear, or the tax treatment for corporations that provide health care would disappear in a system that kind of took out all the old special deals and tried to build from scratch. And people tend, when they hear that, perhaps in the mixed up way it gets translated in the modern media, they think, oh my goodness, I don't want to lose the benefits I get for deductibility of my mortgage interest. How do you get people out of that mindset who may hate the tax code but like the provisions that benefit them?
Well, with all due respect to the flat tax and the Reagan tax cutters, and I do respect both movements, the fair tax, the tax reform that I so passionately believe in, allows every American to take home 100% of their paycheck without withholding or payroll taxes first deducted. And when you compare that with taking a small percentage off your taxes for the interest you paid on your home mortgage deduction or your home mortgage payments, that's a lot better. If everyone takes home everything that they're earning, we permanently stimulate the economy. We lift taxation off of labor, savings, and investment. Those are the things that make the economy grow. And Nobel Prize winning economists and 80 others have said, you go to the fair tax, you're going to see somewhere between 10 and 15 trillion dollars of private investment come flowing into this country right away. Well, that translates to we all go back to work. We are the most productive workers in the world. There is just no reason for the unemployment figures that we're seeing in Michigan and other places if we get our tax code out of the way.
Ken, a final quick question. Paul Volcker has suggested, one of the president's economic advisors has suggested looking at a value-added tax. What was your reaction to that?
A bad one. Value-added tax is the darling of most European countries. Mr. Volcker and apparently people in Mr. Obama's administration are looking at it on top of the income tax. That is unthinkable. It hides the tax inside retail prices. We are already taxed enough. Let's just put it in a simple way. It takes money out of the economy that could grow the economy and get us back to work and gives more money to government. Now, is this a government of, by, and for the people, or are the people existing of, by, and for the government?
Okay.
Now, that moves us in exactly the wrong direction.
Ken Hoagland, we'll have to end it there. Chairman of the online tax revolt. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thanks, John.
I'm joined by CBSNews.com's Stephanie Condon. Stephanie, there's some discrepancies about what's being discussed in Freedom Plaza today and what's actually in the president's tax policies. So what has the president proposed in terms of taxes and tax cuts?
That's right, John. Well, we have a story up on the hot sheet at CBSNews.com today looking at how President Obama's policies have impacted people's taxes. Most people, a portion of people think that President Obama raised their taxes, and not surprisingly, most Tea Partiers think that as well, 64%. But the fact is, in 2009, the only real Obama policy that affected people's taxes was the stimulus bill. And the stimulus was full of tax credits. 98% of Americans got a tax cut in 2009, and tax refunds were at their highest level. I think the average was $3,000, and that was in large part because of the stimulus.
And there, in our poll about Tea Party activists or supporters and activists, there was another interesting finding about taxes, which is they're all angry about taxes, and yet a portion in the poll showed that they thought their taxes were fair. A majority, in fact, right?
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. You know, the Tea Party is supposed to stand for taxed enough already, but 52% of Tea Party supporters said that they think they paid a fair amount in taxes. There was a little bit of discrepancy when you polled the Tea Party activists, the true people who are out there at the rallies and donating to the movement. Those people 42% of those people said that they were taxed fairly. That's still a significant portion for a group that has real issues with government, size of government.
That's right. They say that's their number one issue. And that I thought another thing, though, that was interesting in the poll is they say that's their number one issue, and yet many of them are on Medicare and taking Social Security, and they don't want those large and growing government programs to be touched. Tell me what else our poll showed us about who the Tea Party supporters are and activists are. Who are these people?
They are largely white. The South is overrepresented. They're a little older than most Americans. 3 in 4 Tea Party supporters are over 35, or 45, excuse me. They're pretty angry. That's one of the overwhelming characteristics about them that they share. 92% of Tea Party supporters say that America's on the wrong track. That's a really overwhelming number. 88% disapprove of how President Obama is doing on the job, which is more than twice as much as Americans overall.
And they tend to be fond of calling him a socialist as well. That word seems to be working well for them. Who is their leader? Do they feel like they have a leader? Where does it go in terms of a political movement?
The Tea Party has always prided itself in being a really disparate, loosely organized movement, and that's reflected in the poll. Our poll showed that the Tea Party supporters overwhelmingly like people like Sarah Palin. 66% of Tea Party supporters said they like her. Glenn Beck, the TV personality, also received 60% support. But when the supporters were asked to name a leader without giving any prompts, most people, 29%, couldn't think of anyone that they said they admired in the political field. The person who came out on top was actually former House Speaker Newt Gingrich with just 10%. So there's no real clear leader.
And Sarah Palin, who is popular, a plurality said they didn't think she was qualified to be president.
That's
so
right.
She may be more in the Glenn Beck camp than in the Newt Gingrich camp. As we, in the end here, looking forward now, what does the landscape look like in terms of President Obama's future tax policy, and how much nourishment will the Tea Party activists get in terms of being angry at future policies from the president?
Right. Well, part of the reason why so many Tea Partiers may think that President Obama is raising their taxes, even though he hasn't yet, is because they expect taxes to go up in the future. They see more government spending, and they rightly associate that with having to pay for it somewhere down the road. And so now that the health care bill has been enacted, they expect to see taxes come out of that, and there certainly were quite a few taxes in the bill, although supporters would say that that's completely balanced out by the benefits. So that just comes down to what you think was an appropriate use of government money. Also, there are some misconceptions about issues like the Bush tax cuts. It seems like people may have kind of the wrong idea about what an effect it will have when those expire at the end of the year.
Okay, Stephanie Condon, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Finally, our Bob Schieffer caught up with country music star Garth Brooks at last night's Grammys on the Hill, an event supporting intellectual property rights, and he even managed to break a little news. Take a look.
Well, Garth, you're here in town to get a little award, but what'd you do today?
Just hung out with the president, stuff like that.
Hung out with the president?
Yeah, it was great. It's always great to see him, and he's always more than cordial, more than nice, and this time was no exception.
Now, I understand you also, was there a little award presentation there? Or?
Yeah, there was. He got his second Grammy, which makes him tied with me, which it didn't sit very well with me, but congratulations anyway,
This was for a spoken thing he did.
I believe this is his second one for the spoken, so I think he's turned his focus toward books now, and he'll probably win whatever the big award for the books are, because he has a reputation for winning, it seems.
So he's got a Nobel Peace Prize and a Grammy. Yeah.
Yeah, he does. So we're the same, except I don't have the Nobel Peace Prize.
You have, in addition to having a wonderful career and being an icon in country music, you have also done a lot of work for recording artists on intellectual property rights. And a lot of people say, well, what is that all about? But it's a very important thing to musicians, isn't it?
Yeah, nothing grows without a seed, and our seed is the songwriter. We got to protect those rights for the songwriter, because they're the ones that live by it day by day. Artists have a lot of different ways to make income. Songwriters have that one way, and we need to protect it.
Why is it that you do not let your singles go on to, iTunes,
Yeah,
I guess?
iTunes are digital. We're an album-oriented artist. We always have been. We believe that there's songs on an album that can change a person's life that aren't commercial, single fit. So we put them all together, and there are commercials and there's album cuts, but all of them make the album, which should be a reflection of the artist at the time, that they're making it.
Where do you think country music is right now? A lot of people think it's at a crossroads, that some of the people are doing well and call themselves country artists, that maybe it's a different kind of music.
I think it's exactly the same way it was 20 years ago when Garth Brooks came out. You'd have to ask Haggard that same question, and Haggard might say, punk, whatever. So I just think it's as the generations goes on. If I have my way of what country music is the news at 5 o'clock. Just put to music is what it is. It's our way of life as a people, and as long as it keeps reflecting that, then it's never going to be it'll always be country music, and that's the important thing.
You got friends in low places. Does that refer to the people here in Washington, or?
I could make a whole video from people in this town singing that song, yes.
Well, it's great to have you here in town, Garth, and we want to wish you the very best.
Thank you.
You deserve this honor.
It's great talking with someone who respects country music and knows. It's very cool. It's an honor. Thank you.
Okay.
If country music is news at 5 o'clock, it also has a link to news on Sunday morning. So we will now leave you with a treat. Bob, a country musician himself, led a group of congressmen in a rendition of Friends in Low Places as a tribute to Garth Brooks. In the group are Senators Dick Durbin, Congressman Darrell Issa, and Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee on the tambourine. Join us again tomorrow on CBSNews.com. I'm John Dickerson. Have a great day.
Justification for being what you are.